In the previous two videos, we saw arrays and hashes, and we saw them kind of in a superficial way. On this video, I want to go a little bit deeper on both of them, and I'm going to show yet another data structure, which is called range. So let me, as usual, create a new file, just put anything on it and save it on my code folder. I'm going to call it iterator.rb. Could be any name really, just it only needs a name. All right, so we've seen in the past videos, to create an array, one can do something like this. Let's put some, I don't know, some food here. Donuts, pizza, cupcake, and then to declare a hash, I'm going to call it age. One could do something like, let me actually go and use these elements of the array. So pizza 50, I don't even know what those numbers are. I'm just it could be the amount of, like, we have 100 donuts, or it could be the price. I don't know, anything really, doesn't really matter. So we saw that this is a hash and this is an array, and if you go ahead and print the array, and then we can also print the hash, but let's put in between them, let's put some dashes so that we can differentiate between one and another. So to run it, ruby iterator.rb, and there you go. So the array is printed like this, and the hash is printed like in this way. Now, what I want to go, where do I want to go in this video? I want to show some really important, or the most used methods, the most used functionalities with arrays and hashes. And these functionalities are actually shared among them. So let's say I want to print every element of the array. How would I print every element of the array? Well, we just saw that, I can print it like this, and it would just print it like this, would print every element in the array. Now, what if I want to put like a dash on front of it? And let me actually show multiple ways to do that. So I'm going to start with a.each, and let's ignore for now this hash. We're going to work on it later. So I'm going to do this. So I'm doing a.each, and then there's something different here, which is the do and. So and then here is so this is a pipe element. It's a vertical line or a vertical bar that you have on your keyboard. And if I go and puts the element and run this program, so let me clear this screen. It's gonna do the exact same thing if I were printing the whole array. Now, if I want to put a dash in front of it, remember the lesson of strings where we learned about string interpolation. So if I print a string here and I do this with the sharp symbol, I'm going to actually convert this thing into a string. So this, what this is going to do, is going to do the same thing, but now we can go ahead and put a dash in front of it and save and run it again. So we have the string dash space, and then here is the interpolation thing, which is then converting this element to a string and concatenating with the string. So you probably can figure out that what is happening here is that this line is being called multiple times, and it's being called actually 3 times, and each time the value in the element variable is different, and it's actually the elements inside A. So that's exactly what's happening. So this is a loop, and I'm saying I want to loop and I want to call this block. So every time you have a do and in Ruby, you call this a block. That's the name of it. So this is a block. It's a block. You could call it a block of code or something like that, but it's just a block. So what I'm saying here is that I want to go through each element of this array, and for each element, it is going to call this block. So it's going to execute the code inside this block for each element. And this notation here is the element, the parameters of the block. So the block is kind of like a function in that it has some code that is going to be executed, and it has parameters. So we've done with our goal here, which is to print with a dash, and then you can, if you want to, I don't know, add a dot in the end, you could do anything really. So this is literally calling every one of these elements of the array in order. They're not like this method is not being called in parallel, like it's not being called at the same time. It's being in order, so it's being invoked for the first element, and then for the second one, and then for the third one, and so on. And after this whole thing finishes, then the code continues executing here. So no matter how many times you run this, it's always going to print the same thing over and over again. All right. So just to remember some things, code flow execution from the past. Now, what I really want to go is through this. So this each method is it's called an iterator. So it's iterating over every element of the array. But what we could also do, we could go and iterate over every element of the hash. So let's try that out and see what happens. Let me save the file, clear the terminal, and run it again. And you see that this happens. So what is going on here, and you see these square brackets, and if you realize what this exactly is, it's an array. So if you would put this in Ruby code, it would be an array, right? So this, which is the first line here, this is an array. So the way that it was converted to a string, Ruby just decided to put it like a Ruby code. Well, what I actually want to do, I want to say, let's say that this number on the right for every one of these elements is like we have 50 pizzas, or we have 100 donuts. Yeah, just for the sake of the example. So how would I do that? Well, if the element is an array, we can take each separate part of the array. So we know that the first part of the array is the food, so we can say that element 0. So since the element is an array, we are taking the first element, which is the name of the food. So it's going to be donuts, pizza, and cupcake. And the second one is going to be the quantity. So I'm going to do element, and then this is taking the second element of the array. And now I'm assigning these variables, and I can actually go ahead and use it here. So I'm going to say we have, and then I'm going to replace this with the quantity of, and then the food. So we have, and then it's going to print the quantity of the certain food. So let's go how that looks like. All right. So it doesn't make a lot of sense reading in English here, but I think you got the idea. It's good enough for the example. It could be, I don't know, it could be kilograms or units. I don't know. Units might just be a little bit better. We have 100 units of donuts. That's fine. So, so you see, this thing with a hash. So you saw with an array, naturally the each thing is gonna pass here as a parameter is gonna pass the whatever is inside this array. Now with the hash, if we want to iterate over every element of the hash, it is going to have is always going to be an array, and the first element of the array is going to be the key, and the second one is going to be the value for that key. Also, what you can realize here is if we go ahead and put this thing here, so I took pizza from the middle and put on the top, the order is preserved. So previously we had donuts and then pizza, and now we have pizza and then donuts. So remember that hashes in Ruby, they are ordered. The order of the elements are preserved. And this is also true when we are iterating over these elements. All right, so this code actually can be improved a little bit, and I want to show that. So instead of having to extract here the key and the value of the hash of every element inside a hash, we can just go ahead and put it like food and then quantity, and then we can delete this code and save the file, run it, and it's going to be exactly the same. So what is happening here is when we have more than so we have we are declaring two parameters here, and since whenever Ruby is calling this block, it is passing an array, but it actually expands that array to be the elements inside here. So we don't have, so this makes life a lot easier for whoever is programming. Yeah, so that's a thing. That's a thing I wanted to show. And as I said, this each thing, it works with arrays, it works with hashes, and it also works with another data structure that I want to show. So it's very simple, and I decided not to do a separate video only for that data structure because it's not needed, I think. So that data structure is called a range. So range. Let me actually just comment this code so that it will not interfere. And I'm gonna say that r equals let me say 5, and then dot, and then let's say 10. And then I'm gonna do the same thing. So r.each, and I'm gonna do element, and I'm gonna print this element. So element again using the dash. So save the file. Let me clear this and run it again. So you can see that it's printing the numbers from 5 to 10. So it's printing the numbers in the range of 5 to 10. So that's so this is called a range. This is a special notation, and it's you open parentheses, you put a number, or you can also put a character. I'm gonna explain that later. But you put a number, and then you can put 2 dots or 3 dots. They have different meanings. So 2 dots or 3 dots and another number, and then close parentheses. And this is a range. So I want to show that this is a range by doing, how do we know this is a range? Well, we know that A is an array because the class, whenever we call the class method of A, we are gonna get array. We know that age.class is gonna be hash, and we also know that the class of, well, let me actually write it like this, so maybe it's clearer on the output. And then it's gonna be r.class. So let's run it again. And well, we already saw on the previous videos that this was going to be array, and then here a hash, and then here we have a range. So you can probably see that a range is also quite an important structure in Ruby because it has its own notation. So it has its own way of creating a new range in Ruby. So curly brackets, you create a hash. Square brackets, you create an array. And with parentheses and these either two or three dots, you're creating a range. So what can we do with ranges? Well, we can see that we can easily, I mean, if you wanted to do something like this, let me actually remove this code. If you wanted to iterate over numbers 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, you could make it like an array and then run it, and it would just work fine. But imagine if you have, I don't know, 1,000 numbers in between here, and you just want to go with all of them in order. It would not be feasible to write every single number here. So it would be much simpler to just go like 5 until 5,000. Sorry, 1,000. So I'm going to clear this, and let me actually call clear and then run it. And if I scroll all the way up, we have there 5, and then all the numbers in between, and then 1,000. So, well, we saw that r, let me do this again, r.class equals r.class, it's going to be a range. What we can also do with a range is that we can call .toA, which is going to convert this range into an array. So we can do whatever we would do with an array. So if I just run this again, the result is exactly the same. It's going to produce an array as one would expect. However, then it would also be an array. All right, let me do this. So just yet one more thing about ranges is you see that this is going from 5 to 10. You could also, I mean, you could use negative numbers if you want. So -5 until 10. Let's use 5 just for simplicity. And I told you about using 3 dots. So when you use 3 dots, the only difference is that it is not going to include the last element. So that's the only difference. So you could do like this, and 3 dots is saying from 5 including 5 until 10, but not including 10. So this is equivalent of saying from 5 to 9. But in some situations, maybe it makes sense to use it like this, especially because you can do things like this. So you can use a variable inside here, and maybe if you're getting this variable from a user input or a file, then it maybe makes sense to write it like with 2 or 3 dots. Anyway, this would produce the expected output that is not including the last value, which is 10. This n could also be here. Then you could say 100. There's no real limitation here. So, all right. These are ranges, quite simple stuff. You don't have also, well, you don't have to declare a variable. You can just do it like this. And of course, it's going to work. And this, I would say, this is maybe the most common way of using ranges, is to say, I want to iterate, or I want to do something 10 times, and I don't even care about which. So here I know inside this loop, I have this element, which I could say the index. I could also call it index. It's like I'm doing this 10 times, actually. If I go from 0 to 10, I'm doing 11 times. So let me go from 1 to 10. I'm doing this 10 times. I don't care what exactly it is. So let's say, I don't know. Hey, let's say, hey. You just want to say, hey, 10 times. You can even skip this since we are not using it. All right. Cool. So what else I want to show you is, well, you see that this each method, it works for ranges, it works for hashes, and also arrays. Now, there are a few other methods that also work with every one of those. So I'm gonna write here in the as a comment in down here. So there's each. there is each, well, actually there's map, and then there is select, there is reject, there is find, and there's this one which sometimes is quite useful. So there are more than this. These are just 6, I would say, most common methods to be used with ranges or hashes or arrays. And yeah, so let me actually go ahead and show a few of them. So each we already saw, and it goes through each element, and then we can do anything that we want with it. So what if we use map? So what does map does? I'm going to iterate through this hash, and then I'm going to do the food and quantity, and then let's say food, we have quantity of, let's say, kilograms of food. So we already saw this with each, and if I just copy this code and put it here and let's put some dashes in between so we can separate the results. And actually, I wanted to use each here and map here. So what is the difference between each and map? Because you see, these are quite the same. Well, that's true, and the only difference actually is that map is going to, so here we can return something. So let's say new foods. So let's say the new foods, and let me actually use a now. I'm going to say new foods. I'm declaring new variable. Let me remove this comment. So new foods equals, and then the array up here, this one, we're going to iterate over each element. We are going to have no quantity because it's only the food name. And yeah, we are going to map. And then after, we are going to go through this new thing here, and we are going to iterate over it, printing then the, I don't know, let's say, actually let me change this and say just element, and I'm going to do it like element. So we don't know what's going on here. So let me say food here. What will happen if I execute this? Well, I see that it's just printing the array A, but actually here it is not printing anything. It is printing here. So the thing is that let's say food dot upcase, and I execute this again, and you probably are already figuring out what is going on. So this map, what it does is that it goes through each element of whatever is here. Could be an array, could be a hash, could be a range, and it is going to transform. So it's a transformation function. So you're going to get for each element, and whatever you return here, remember in Ruby, like this is the return value. So whatever is the last thing here. If I would, let me actually go through this again because you might not remember this. So if I do this, I'm going to have 5. That's because this code acts, so this is a block, remember? And it behaves in a very, very similar way to a function. And a function, as we saw earlier, it has a return value. So it's going to return something. You call a function, and the function can return some value. All right? So in Ruby, in a lot of programming languages, you have to say return and then the value that you want to return. In Ruby, you don't use return. You can use it. You cannot use inside a block. Actually, you can, but it's a little bit more complicated, and I'm not going to go through that in this video. But usually, you just, whatever comes last in the lines of code is whatever is going to be returned. So if in this code here, the last thing is 5. That's why it is returning 5 here. If I just remove that 5 and run this again, so the last line, and remember that blank lines, they don't do anything. So the last line that actually contains some code is going to be the value returned. And then here we are saying food. Let's take the food, and uppercase is going to transform the string into all uppercase characters. All right. And then what this map does is that it transforms all elements with a transforming function, and whatever is inside here is being transformed. And then it creates a new array, which is then assigned to this variable. So in a very simple term, it allows you to transform every element of an array. All right. Well, and then here we are going through this array, and I'm gonna actually go and show that. Oh, come on, what did I do? So I wanna say that new foods, I wanna show to you that this is actually a array. So this is an array. Now, what if I go through the hash? What will happen? So let me just return the food. So if I go through the hash, now you can see that there's something weird here, all right? Because previously I was passing an array here, and I was getting back here also an array. But now I'm passing a hash, and I'm getting back an array instead. And then we see this weird thing again here, all right? And then we could go here and separate the quantity. So this is gonna only print the food name, because element is gonna be the first element of this array, and quantity is gonna be the second, although we are not using it. Yeah. All right, so you see that for hashes, it doesn't quite work that way. But we can still work with it. So let's say in this hash that I want to return the first element of food. Actually, I can also here put quantity, just as with which each it would be possible to do this. With map is also possible. So I can say food. So I'm gonna return only the food, quantity, and then it's going to be the quantities. Now let's say that actually I want to return here a hash and not an array. What could I do? And let's say that we want to go through each one of these and increase the amount of whatever we got here. So I want to go in this and I want to increase the quantity, all right? However, I don't want to change this variable. I don't want to change anything that is inside age. I want to create a new hash, and I want to it should be returned into this new foods variable, all right? So the way we're gonna do is we're gonna return here an array, and if we do just this, this is equivalent, it's the same thing as if we would have done it like this. So a, just a variable name, could be anything, could be element, but these two things here are equivalent. They're doing the same thing. If you can't see that, please go back in the video again and where I explain this comma here and try to figure it out. All right. So if I do this, it's going to return it like that. All right. Now what I can do actually, let's say I want to increase the quantity, right? I want to increase the quantity. So let's increase it. Let's actually multiply it by 2. So I'm going to multiply by 2. So it's going to be the food and then the quantity multiplied by 2. So we are doubling everything we have. However, this is already, this is still an array. This is not a hash. Now there's a way to transform this into a hash very, very easily. And we can say that new foods equals, so we here we are going to reassign a value to this. We are going to change whatever is in this variable. So the notation is, and this is also very important, this is very common, or maybe not very common, but it's quite common in Ruby to do this. And then you say new foods. So here we are transforming this, and we are then assigning the return of this into this new foods variable. And once we execute this, we are going to see it's going to be the same result here. However, now new foods is a hash, not an array anymore, which means that we can go ahead here and say food and quantity, and we can then say we have quantity, let's say kilograms of, and then whatever food we have. All right. So it's a hash. Which means we can say of pizza we have, and then we can say new foods, and then pizza. And I'm using simple quotes here instead of double because I'm already using double here. All right. So we have, and this is going to be the quantity of pizza. All right. So I'm saying specifically pizza. We have 100 kilograms of pizza, but and I want to show to you that the although we doubled the quantity here, we didn't change at all anything inside age. Of pizza we had, and instead of new foods, I'm gonna pick age, kilograms of pizza. So I run this. So we have 100, but we had 50. So you see that from here it's getting the value, it's fetching the value from age, which is totally untouched. So pizza 50. All right. So let me do something else. Let me comment this. Let me save this file, and then let me run this. And now we see we have a hash. All right. That's why we can access an element of this hash with this notation. So if I don't do this, if I do not transform this into a hash, what is going to happen with this code is that it's just going to work fine, because we are iterating here, and the element inside new foods, each element is an array with 2 positions. And then when we do this thing here with the comma, it expands into both the variables. That's why this works. But now if we try to do this, this is actually going to fail, because new foods is an array and not a hash. So if you would need, for instance, just this code without this comment, so removing this comment, you would not even need to convert this into a hash. But if you then want to execute this, you definitely have to convert it. So if we convert it and then run it, we can see it just works. All right. So that's because, of course, an array is not going to have a position pizza, all right? Because arrays only have numerical positions. All right. Cool. So we saw each, we saw map, and if you try and do each here, the thing is that it's not going to work. So each is not going to return whatever you're expecting here. It has to be map. All right. And then we also have these ones. So let me actually go and show what this is. So let me remove this. And if we run it, I want to clean it. Yeah, there we go. So if I run this, I'm gonna have that result. So all the foods but doubled. All right. Now let's say that we don't want donuts. We don't want donuts. The way we can do this is we can say the new foods equals new foods. So what is this doing? This is actually doing nothing. All right. It does make sense. It's just assigning the same variable to the same variable. However, if we do select, and then we can also do food and quantity. So these are all iterating functions. All these are iterating functions. This one is a little bit different. I'm gonna explain later. But all these are we can use this thing in all of them. And here in select, what it does is that so select and also reject, they are filters. They're called filters. So we can filter which elements of an array or a hash we are going to include in the result. So again, this thing is not going to change whatever value was in new foods, but the result of all of this is going to be then assigned to new foods, right? So let me go and say food equals, because now we are comparing. So in the select method, we want to return a Boolean value. So that is either true or false. All right. So if food equals donuts, then what we want to do, actually, we don't want donuts, right? We don't want donuts. So we say different. If food is different from donuts. So you see what this is doing is going through each element and is not changing any element. You remember, map changes elements. We are remapping. We are doing a transformation. Select is not changing any element. It is only allowing us to say we want to include this element or we want to not include this element. And select, we are selecting which elements we want. So for each element that returns true is going to be included in the result. So if food is not donuts, then we want to include it. That's why donuts was removed from our list. All right, because donuts, well, should be pretty obvious that donuts is not different from itself. All right. So food, and I want to show you reject function, and reject is just like select, but it is the opposite. So now we are rejecting every element that returns true. Instead of including it, now it's not including. So this means that the result is going to be the opposite of what we were using with select. All right. So let's say we want to say I want all foods but donuts, and this maybe this is better to be read than. You see, there are multiple ways of achieving the same thing, but you can decide. Maybe in some situations using select would be better, in other rejects would be better. So I hope that's explained. And also we could have used that on age first, but I just did it on the new foods directly. So we are calculating some value, putting it in the new food variables, and then we are going through that and not changing the elements inside the array, but actually selecting which elements we want, and then assigning this resulting array into the new foods variable. And here we are saying, well, take this array here, and convert it to a hash, and then assign this returning value into the new foods variable. All right, so we saw this for once, and I want to show now find. So find is a little bit different, and I'm gonna wipe all this code, and I'm gonna say that element equals, and then I'm gonna only print element. All right, and I'm gonna say find, and then I'm gonna say food equals pizza. Oh, it's It's the comparison, also returning true or false. So running this, what it's gonna yield? It's gonna yield. So this is actually an array, because if we print the class of it, we can see it's an array. And what puts does is that it actually, whenever it prints an array, it prints each element of it in a separate line. But we could just go ahead and say element food. Oh, come on. Element has, we have, and then element 1 kilograms. So we have pizza, we have 50 kilograms. All right. Hope that makes sense. Element 0, element 1. All right, element 1. So what find does is that it goes through each element of the array or the hash, or also could be the range, but it would not make a lot of sense to use find on a range, although you could do that. And it returns, so for the first time it sees a true here, it returns that element. So it doesn't return the true, of course, but it returns the element where the condition was true, right? That's why we are seeing here pizza being printed out. So we saw all these functions here, and now let's see the last one. So I'm gonna go with the array first because it's just easier. So if I say a each, and then the element inside, and if I put that with a dash in front and then the element, and then I run that, we're gonna just be printing each element. So we saw that before, all right? So let's say that I want to actually know some more information. I want to know where, in what position of the array each element is. So I'm iterating through each element of this array, and I want to know, currently I know what the element is. So I know we have donuts, I know pizza, I know cupcake, but I also want to know that donuts is in position 0, that pizza is in position 1, and that cupcake is in position 2. So that's exactly what each with index does. Index. Because when I say A at position 1, so this is going to fetch pizza, all right? I could also say, instead of saying A at position 1, I can say A at index 1. So index is actually more accurate than using the term position, all right? But it's just about terms. So that's why it's called index. So donuts is at index 0, pizza is at index 1, and cupcake is at index 2. And the way you can know that is by using each with index. And then we say at position index, or I could replace this with index. So let me save this and run it. And then you see that we have pizza, which is at position 1, all right? So it's here, position 1, and so on and so forth, all right? So it's simple as that. It's just like each, but it also adds a parameter to the list of parameters, and then we can know the index of the element. Also, we can use this with the hash. So I'm gonna use that with the hash. And what is gonna happen if I run this? So we're gonna have that again. We have to deal now with the fact that the element, whenever you're using each or map or any of these, and you're using with a hash, the element is going to be transformed into an array. So it's not that the element is going to be transformed, but whenever you receive it as a parameter, you're always going to receive it as an array with two positions, where the first one is the key and the second one is the value for that key. All right. So with each, what we could do is we could just put 2 parameters, and then the second parameter is going to be the value of the key. All right. So this doesn't make sense, but we can see that element here, the first thing is the key of the hash, and you see at position 50 is actually just the value of the second parameter, which is then 50, which is the value of the key. All right. So how do we extract each with index? Well, we could go back to say like food, let's say kilograms. I want to also have the quantity. So what we could say is that we want to know both food equals element. We want to know both, we want to know the key and the value, so both of them. So we know that the key is at the first position and the value of it is going to be at the second position, therefore position number 1. All right. So pizza, 50 kilograms of it is at position 0, and so on and so forth. So that works, but there's a better way to do that, which is to expand this directly. Now that was easy with each, but now we have this index, and if we do it like this, let's try doing it like this. All right, because with with only using each, not with index, but only each, this thing would work if we would then have a pipe here. All right, now let's see what happens here. Let's see what happens, and it doesn't work. All right, so it doesn't work. What we are seeing now is that food is getting this whole thing. So food is actually the array containing both the key and the value, and quantity is getting the index. That's why it's 0, 1, and 2. And index is a non-value. It doesn't have anything on it. That's why it's being printed as a non-character. It's just nothing. However, the way we solve this is that we add parentheses here. All right. So picture that this first thing is going to be an array. And then we say, by using these parentheses, we say expand this first thing, which is an array, in these 2 variables. And then of this whole array here, this whole thing is also an array, expand it into this element and then the index. All right. So if you didn't understand this explanation, don't worry, because it's very, very likely that it's never going to get more complex than this. And honestly, if it gets more complex than this, you probably don't want to do it. All right. I would say that in real life code, you don't want code that looks very complex, because that makes it harder to maintain. That makes it harder for other people to read your code. All right. So you want to simplify, even if you have to write more lines of code. So I would say this is kind of the limit. So you wouldn't have like I don't know, more complex, more levels here, whatever. This would probably never happen. And if you would need this, you would try to use it in a different way. All right. So you can just memorize this, and it's totally fine. So you see that now executing this, each variable is getting the exact value that we wanted. All right. So this is it. This is it for this video. We saw the iterators. We saw each. Each goes through each element of an array, of a hash or a range, and just does you can do something with that element. Map goes through each element, and it allows you to then transform the result. So get a new result with transformed elements, right? Select and reject, they're also kind of a transformation function, but they're not going to transform the elements inside the array. Rather, they're going to transform the which elements are going to be included or not in the resulting array, right? And when I say array, I actually am including also hashes. Find is going to find one single element of an array, right? And each with index is just like each, but it includes an index, which is quite handy sometimes. So why did I show you in this video? Why did I make a lesson just for this? Because there are quite a few methods. If you go and read the Ruby documentation, you're going to see a lot of methods there. All right. So it can get a little bit overwhelming as a beginner to know, okay, which one of these do I have to memorize first? Because to memorize all of them is quite a bummer, right? So I would say that these ones are the most important ones. All right. The most important for going through the elements of an array of a hash, or you could also call it to traverse the elements of an array or a hash, or to make some transformations to it. So these ones are the most important. That's why I showed in this video. And we are going to use these things on maybe not the next video, but in the few upcoming ones. All right, so see you next time. Thank you. Goodbye.